The Marvel Cinematic Universe has pulled off plenty of unforgettable reveals over the years, but every once in a while, a trailer arrives that completely changes the conversation before a single ticket has even been sold. That's exactly what happened the moment the first trailer for Avengers Doomsday dropped. At first glance, it looks like a celebration of everything Marvel fans have been waiting for. Familiar faces return. Old friendships seem to come back to life. The scale feels bigger than anything we've seen since Endgame. But if you slow down for just a second, something feels wrong. Almost every major shot in this trailer carries a question hidden beneath it. Every smile seems slightly off. Every victory feels temporary. Every reunion comes with an uncomfortable sense that somebody knows more than everyone else. And sitting quietly at the center of all of it is one man whose presence alone changes the entire balance of power across the multiverse. Dr. Doom isn't introduced as another villain looking to conquer the world. He's introduced as someone who already seems to stand above it. That difference might end up defining this entire movie because Marvel isn't simply asking us who can stop Dr. Doom. They're asking something much scarier. What happens when the strongest heroes we've ever known aren't even close to being strong enough? That question becomes impossible to ignore the moment Thor launches what should have been one of the most devastating attacks in MCU history. For years, Thor has represented raw power. He's survived the heart of a dying star. He's gone toe-to-toe with Hela, Gore, Hulk, and Thanos. Most importantly, he wields Stormbreaker, a weapon that isn't just legendary because of its mythology, but because we've already seen what it can do. During the Battle of Wakanda, Stormbreaker cut straight through the combined energy of all 6 Infinity Stones. Think about that for a second. Thanos had completed the Infinity Gauntlet. He possessed the greatest collection of cosmic power ever assembled, and yet Stormbreaker still reached him. That single moment permanently established the axe as one of the deadliest weapons in Marvel history, which is exactly why the trailer's biggest moment feels almost impossible to process. Thor attacks with absolute confidence, and Dr. Doom doesn't dodge. He doesn't cast an elaborate spell. He doesn't summon a shield. He simply raises 2 fingers and stops Stormbreaker as if it weighs nothing at all. There isn't even visible effort on his face. No strain, no surprise, just complete control. It's the kind of visual that instantly tells the audience everything they need to know without a single line of dialogue. Marvel isn't trying to convince us that Doom is powerful. They're demonstrating that the old rules of power no longer apply. Naturally, the first reaction is disbelief. How can anyone casually stop an attack that even Thanos couldn't fully neutralize? Is Dr. Doom simply stronger than Thanos? But Marvel has been very careful with Doom throughout decades of comics, and one characteristic separates him from almost every villain we've ever seen on screen. His greatest weapon has never been physical strength alone. Victor Von Doom is a scientific genius capable of matching Reed Richards intellectually. At the same time, he's one of the most dangerous sorcerers on Earth, with magical knowledge rivaled by only a handful of beings. Separately, those abilities already make him terrifying. Together, they create someone who can solve problems in ways other characters can't even imagine. But there's another side of Dr. Doom that longtime comic readers immediately think about whenever his power suddenly seems impossible. Doom has repeatedly found ways to take power that was never originally his. He doesn't always become stronger by training harder or discovering a new weapon. Sometimes he simply claims someone else's power for himself. And once that possibility enters your mind, that tiny trailer moment suddenly becomes much more interesting than it first appeared. Marvel Comics is filled with moments where Doctor Doom refuses to accept the limits placed on ordinary people. He's stolen unimaginable abilities from beings most characters wouldn't even dare confront. Cosmic entities, reality manipulators, near-omnipotent forces. Doom has challenged all of them if it meant moving one step closer to his ultimate goal. That's why so many fans immediately started asking the same question after watching the trailer. What if the Doom we're seeing isn't operating on his natural power alone? What if he's already absorbed the abilities of someone far beyond the Avengers? Suddenly, stopping Stormbreaker with 2 fingers doesn't feel exaggerated anymore. It feels logical. The trailer never directly tells us how Doom reached this level, but that's exactly what makes the mystery so compelling. Marvel wants the audience to speculate because every possible answer completely changes the stakes. If Doom has somehow taken the power of an entity that already existed inside the MCU, then the real tragedy isn't just how powerful Doom has become. It's wondering who had to lose everything for him to reach that point. One possibility immediately stands out because of how perfectly it explains the footage. Sentry has long been one of Marvel's most overwhelming powerhouses, a character whose strength, durability, speed, and energy manipulation push him into an entirely different league from traditional superheroes. If Doctor Doom somehow gained access to even a portion of Sentry's abilities, Thor's attack suddenly becomes far less impressive from Doom's perspective. Instead of watching a god challenge another god, we'd be watching someone who has already climbed beyond that level altogether. Of course, Sentry isn't the only name being discussed. Some fans believe the source could be connected to a fragment of eternity itself. Others point toward Franklin Richards, whose reality-warping potential has always placed him among Marvel's most extraordinary beings. And then there's perhaps the most fascinating possibility of all: Loki. Not the mischievous prince we first met over a decade ago, but the god of stories. The being now responsible for holding together countless timelines after replacing the temporal loom. If someone like Doctor Doom somehow found a way to exploit, absorb, or corrupt even a fraction of that unimaginable power, the balance of the multiverse wouldn't simply shift. It would collapse entirely in his favor. None of these theories are confirmed, but each one explains something the trailer deliberately refuses to answer. Where did this version of Doctor Doom become so overwhelmingly unstoppable? And that's where another strange detail quietly begins demanding attention. While everyone was understandably focused on Thor and Doom, Marvel slipped something else into the trailer that feels equally unsettling: Steve Rogers returns. For many fans, that alone should have been one of the happiest moments in MCU history. Captain America has always represented certainty, hope, moral clarity. Whenever Steve Rogers walks into a room, the audience instinctively believes that everything will somehow be okay. But this version feels different. It's difficult to explain at first because nothing appears obviously wrong. The face is familiar, the posture is recognizable. Yet something about the expression refuses to match the Steve Rogers we've spent years watching. His smile lingers just a little too comfortably. His eyes don't carry the warmth people naturally associate with him. Even Thor's reaction suggests that something isn't adding up. Instead of celebrating an old friend's return, there's visible hesitation. Almost as if Thor himself senses that the man standing before him isn't exactly who he appears to be. Marvel has used body language to hide major twists before, and this trailer seems determined to make us question every familiar face instead of immediately trusting it. That suspicion has opened the door to one of the most talked about theories surrounding the trailer. What if this isn't the Steve Rogers we followed since the first Avenger? Across Marvel Comics, countless alternate realities have produced radically different versions of beloved heroes, and one version in particular continues to dominate fan discussions. Earth 6131's Hydra, Steve Rogers. A Captain America whose life unfolded under completely different circumstances after being raised within Hydra's ideology from childhood. On the surface, he still possesses the courage, discipline, and leadership that define Steve Rogers. He can even prove himself worthy enough to wield Mjolnir under the right circumstances, making him an especially dangerous imposter because he doesn't immediately trigger suspicion through weakness. Instead, the danger comes from motivation. A Steve Rogers shaped by Hydra wouldn't necessarily announce himself as a villain. He would manipulate trust, weaponize familiarity, and quietly reshape events before anyone realized what was happening. If Marvel has borrowed even pieces of that concept, then Thor's uneasy reaction suddenly becomes far more understandable. He's not recognizing an enemy. He's recognizing that something about his oldest friend simply doesn't feel right. But there's another possibility that's just as intriguing, and in many ways even more emotionally complicated. What if this really is the original Steve Rogers? The same man who chose to remain in the past with Peggy Carter after the events of Avengers Endgame. Ever since that ending, fans have debated what truly happened to Steve's timeline. Marvel intentionally left just enough ambiguity for multiple interpretations to exist. If Steve created an entirely separate branch reality by staying with Peggy, then bringing him back into the main timeline isn't as simple as opening a portal. It raises enormous questions about the stability of the multiverse itself. Because if two legitimate versions of Steve Rogers now exist across intersecting realities, every interaction between them has consequences. The multiverse saga has repeatedly taught us that timelines aren't designed to overlap indefinitely. Branches collide, realities bleed into one another. Eventually, incursions begin. So if the original Steve has somehow returned at the exact moment Dr. Doom begins reshaping reality, his appearance may not be coincidence at all. It may be another symptom of a multiverse that's already beginning to tear itself apart. Suddenly, Steve's return isn't just nostalgic fan service. It becomes evidence that the barriers separating realities are failing faster than anyone realizes. And that's what makes this trailer so cleverly constructed. Every reveal carries two completely different meanings, depending on what Dr. Doom has already accomplished behind the scenes. If reality is still intact, Steve's return is simply another heroic reunion. But if Doom has already started manipulating timelines, then every familiar face becomes a mystery instead of a comfort. Marvel knows exactly how much emotional weight Steve Rogers carries. They understand that audiences instinctively lower their guard the moment they see him. That's why even the smallest change in his behavior becomes impossible to ignore. It's not about whether he smiles. It's about how he smiles. It's not about what he says. It's about what he doesn't say. For a character whose entire legacy is built on honesty and unwavering conviction, silence can be more unsettling than any villain's speech. And if Thor, the person who fought beside Steve through humanity's darkest battles, is the first one to hesitate, maybe we're supposed to hesitate too. Regardless of which theory ultimately proves correct, one thing is undeniable. Just seeing Steve Rogers standing alongside Thor again awakens something Marvel hasn't been able to recreate since Endgame. For years, the emotional core of the MCU revolved around three heroes whose journeys constantly intertwined. Tony Stark represented innovation. Steve Rogers embodied principle. Thor carried the burden of mythology and legacy. Together they formed a balance that defined an entire generation of storytelling. Losing that trinity after Endgame left a void that no single hero could completely replace. Now, whether through time travel, alternate realities, or multiversal chaos, the possibility of seeing Steve and Thor reunited instantly reminds audiences why this saga feels so much bigger than another crossover movie. And if Tony Stark's legacy continues influencing the story as rumors and speculation have suggested, the emotional gravity becomes even stronger. Dr. Doom isn't simply threatening individual heroes. He may be threatening the very history that built the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While fans continue debating Steve Rogers frame by frame, Marvel quietly hid another layer of storytelling somewhere completely different. Not inside the trailer itself, but within the official promotional poster. At first glance, it looks like exactly what you'd expect from a blockbuster campaign. Dark tones, gothic architecture, Doom standing with unmistakable authority. But the longer you study the artwork, the more it begins to resemble a painting filled with deeply personal memories rather than simple promotional imagery. Almost every object appears intentionally placed. Every shadow feels symbolic. And at the very center of that composition sits something surprisingly intimate, a mural depicting a mother holding her child. It's an image that feels strangely peaceful compared to everything surrounding it. And that contrast alone immediately raises questions. Why would Marvel place such a vulnerable family portrait in the middle of artwork promoting its most terrifying villain? One interpretation connects directly to one of the defining tragedies of Victor Von Doom's life. His mother, Cynthia Von Doom, has always been one of the most important influences on his character. Her fate shaped his obsession with power, knowledge, and ultimately control over forces that no ordinary human should ever possess. But the mural doesn't necessarily have to represent only Cynthia. Another compelling possibility is that it's symbolic of Doom's own family, his wife, his child, the ordinary life Victor might have once dreamed of before becoming the figure the world would eventually fear. If that's true, then the poster isn't celebrating Dr. Doom's rise to power. It's mourning the man who disappeared beneath the armor. Suddenly, the artwork transforms into something much more tragic. Instead of asking us to admire the conqueror, Marvel is inviting us to understand the broken human being who existed before the mask. That interpretation becomes even more powerful when you consider another theory surrounding Doom's origin in this story. What if his universe wasn't destroyed because he sought conquest, but because it became the first victim of an incursion? Imagine witnessing your entire reality collapse. Watching everyone you've ever loved vanish while you're powerless to stop it. Family, friends, home, history, everything erased. For someone as brilliant and determined as Victor Von Doom, surviving such unimaginable loss wouldn't necessarily inspire acceptance. It would inspire obsession. If Doom truly failed to save the people closest to him, then every decision afterward begins to make frightening emotional sense. He doesn't pursue ultimate power because he craves a throne. He pursues it because he never intends to feel helpless again. From that perspective, every kingdom he builds, every timeline he controls, and every impossible ability he seeks becomes part of a single desperate mission to create a reality where loss can never happen again, even if achieving that goal requires sacrificing countless other worlds. The symbolism woven throughout the poster seems to reinforce that emotional burden. Near the central mural sits a mysterious sphere surrounded by 3 moons suspended among bright heavenly clouds. Visually, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the artwork, but symbolically, it feels incredibly heavy. The celestial imagery suggests something larger than a single planet. It evokes the idea of an entire reality, something precious, isolated, and hanging by an impossibly fragile thread. The 3 moons almost feel like silent witnesses orbiting a memory that can never be restored. Rather than representing power, the sphere resembles responsibility. A world Victor couldn't protect, a universe whose weight he continues carrying long after its destruction. If Marvel intentionally designed the artwork this way, then they're subtly telling us that Doctor Doom's greatest burden isn't the empire he hopes to build. It's the world he already lost. Every future decision stems from that single wound. The lower portion of the poster shifts into an entirely different emotional register. Bright celestial imagery gives way to darkness. Shadows consume the landscape, and within those shadows stands a solitary robed figure leading the way forward. It's easy to dismiss this as atmospheric artwork, but its placement feels too deliberate for that. The figure appears less like a servant and more like a guide. Someone walking through an underground reality where light has almost completely disappeared. Many fans believe this represents Doom himself journeying through the darkest chapter of his existence. Not physically, but emotionally. It's the visual embodiment of grief. Before Victor can become Doctor Doom, he has to pass through despair, regret, anger, and absolute isolation. Every step deeper into that darkness strips away another piece of his humanity, until only purpose remains. And once that transformation is complete, there is no path back to the man he used to be. Perhaps the most heartbreaking detail in the entire poster isn't hidden in the background at all. It's right there, in Doctor Doom's hand. Instead of wearing the iconic metal mask that has defined him for decades, Victor is holding it at his side. That single artistic decision changes the emotional meaning of the entire image. For most people, the mask is Doctor Doom. It's the face of the tyrant, the conqueror, the ruler who commands absolute fear across entire civilizations. But by removing it, Marvel reminds us that underneath all of that mythology is still Victor Von Doom, a man standing alone in front of a memory he can never reclaim. He isn't staring at enemies. He isn't standing on a battlefield. He's standing before a painting that appears to represent the family he couldn't save. In that moment, the mask almost feels too heavy to wear. It's as if Victor allows himself one final moment as a husband, as a father, as an ordinary human being before burying that identity forever beneath cold metal. And that's why the mask itself carries so much symbolism. It's easy to think of it as armor, but emotionally, it's something much more devastating. The moment Victor puts that mask back on, he isn't simply protecting his face. He's burying his guilt. He's sealing away regret. He's locking every painful memory behind a layer of steel because the man underneath can no longer survive the weight of those emotions. The mask becomes a wall separating Victor Von Doom from Doctor Doom. One side still remembers love, family, and failure. The other side believes emotion is weakness and control is the only path to salvation. Standing in front of that mural without the mask almost feels like Victor saying goodbye to the last pieces of his humanity. It's a silent apology to the people he couldn't protect, a final acknowledgement that no matter how much power he gains from this point forward, nothing will ever erase the fact that he was too late when it mattered most. If that interpretation is correct, then the poster isn't introducing Marvel's next great villain. It's documenting the exact moment a grieving man chooses to become one. Every great antagonist believes they're justified, but Doctor Doom has always been different because his motivations rarely begin with cruelty. They begin with loss. He doesn't wake up wanting chaos. He convinces himself that absolute control is the only way to prevent another tragedy. That's what makes him so dangerous. The audience can understand the emotion driving his decisions even while rejecting the actions themselves. And that complexity is something the MCU has been building toward ever since the multiverse saga began asking a difficult question. How far would someone go if they genuinely believed only they could save reality? For Stephen Strange, that belief nearly destroyed multiple universes. For Wanda Maximoff, it consumed innocent lives in pursuit of family. For Kang, it justified endless wars across time. Dr. Doom may simply be the next evolution of that same idea, except unlike everyone before him, he possesses the intelligence, patience, and determination to actually succeed. Another fascinating possibility is the location of this painting. The architecture surrounding it feels unmistakably regal, almost cathedral-like, suggesting that the mural may hang somewhere inside Doom's own castle in Latveria. If that's true, then the image takes on another layer of meaning. Imagine ruling an entire nation while keeping the memory of your family permanently displayed in the most sacred room of your home. Every decision you make, every war you wage, every throne you sit upon happens beneath the watchful eyes of the people whose loss shaped your destiny. Rather than hiding his past, Victor preserves it. Not because he enjoys remembering the pain, but because he refuses to let himself forget why he became Dr. Doom in the first place. The mural becomes both a memorial and a warning. It reminds Victor that weakness cost him everything once, and in his mind, weakness will never be allowed to do so again. As emotionally powerful as the poster is, the trailer itself quietly introduces another mystery that may be even more important to the future of the multiverse. And strangely enough, it revolves around the one character who should be the safest person in existence right now, Loki. The last time we saw him, his journey reached one of the most extraordinary conclusions in the entire MCU. He sacrificed everything to become the god of stories, replacing the temporal loom and holding together the infinite branches of reality with his own power. It wasn't just a victory, it was a transformation into something almost mythological. Loki no longer belonged to one timeline. He had become the living foundation that allowed every timeline to continue existing. So when the trailer suddenly shows him somewhere that looks remarkably ordinary, a quiet home that strongly resembles Steve Rogers' house, the immediate reaction isn't excitement, it's confusion. Why would someone responsible for maintaining the entire multiverse be standing in what appears to be a normal living room? The simplest explanation is also the most believable. What we're seeing may not be taking place after Loki's sacrifice at all. It could be a flashback. Before taking his place at the center of the multiverse, Loki fully understood what was coming. He had seen countless timelines. He had witnessed endless possibilities. He knew that preserving reality would require impossible choices. So what if, before accepting that burden, he spent time visiting the heroes who mattered most? Not to fight beside them, but to prepare them. Imagine Loki traveling across different realities, quietly meeting individuals he believed would one day become the multiverse's final line of defense. Steve Rogers would naturally be near the top of that list, not because of physical strength, but because Steve has always inspired people to unite when hope begins disappearing. If Loki truly understood the threat approaching reality, seeking out Captain America before everything changed would make perfect narrative sense. But Marvel rarely builds an entire trailer around the simplest answer, and that's where another theory begins sounding almost disturbingly plausible. What if Loki isn't absent from his throne because he chose to leave it? What if someone forced him off it? We've already established that Doctor Doom appears vastly more powerful than anyone expected. We've considered the possibility that he may have absorbed abilities far beyond his own. If any of those theories hold even a fraction of truth, then the God of Stories himself suddenly becomes a target. Because as long as Loki remains connected to every branch of reality, reshaping the multiverse becomes nearly impossible. Doom would need to remove the one being capable of maintaining order before constructing his own version of existence. That possibility changes everything. Instead of asking how Doom became powerful enough to stop Thor, we begin asking a much darker question. What if the first battle of this entire story already happened, and Loki lost? If Doom somehow defeated or dethroned the God of Stories, the consequences would be almost unimaginable. Without Loki holding the branches together, surviving timelines could begin collapsing into one another until only fragments remained. From those fragments, Doom could reshape reality according to his own design, creating a world built not on natural history, but on his personal vision of perfection. Comic readers immediately recognize where that idea leads. Battleworld. A reality stitched together from the broken remains of countless universes, ruled by a single figure who believes only he deserves to decide what survives. If the trailer is quietly hinting that Marvel has already reached the earliest stages of that scenario, then every strange reunion, every familiar face, and every unexplained location suddenly fits into a much larger puzzle. The heroes aren't simply gathering for another Avengers mission. They may already be living inside a reality that Doctor Doom has begun rewriting. And if Loki has survived that confrontation, his role becomes even more fascinating. Instead of sitting upon the throne as the guardian of infinite timelines, he could be moving through broken realities, using the remnants of his time-slipping abilities, searching for the people capable of restoring what was lost. Suddenly, his appearance near Steve Rogers no longer feels random. It feels intentional. Every visit becomes another piece of a desperate plan. Every conversation becomes an attempt to reunite heroes who no longer even remember the world they originally belonged to. That would also explain why the trailer feels so emotionally strange. Characters recognize each other, but something seems slightly disconnected, almost as if memories have been altered or histories have been rewritten. It's not that they're acting out of character. It's that reality itself may no longer be the one they remember. And if that's true, then the biggest twist hidden inside this trailer isn't Doctor Doom's incredible power, Steve Rogers' mysterious return, or even Loki's unexpected appearance. It's the terrifying possibility that the war for the multiverse has already begun long before the Avengers realize they're fighting it. And once you start looking at the trailer from that perspective, every single mystery stops competing with the others and instead begins supporting one central narrative. Doctor Doom's impossible power, Steve Rogers' unsettling return, Loki's unexpected location, even the deeply emotional symbolism hidden inside the official poster. None of these feel like isolated marketing choices anymore. They feel like carefully placed puzzle pieces designed to tell one much larger story without actually revealing it. Marvel has done this before, planting clues in plain sight that only make complete sense after the movie arrives. But Avengers Doomsday feels different because instead of hiding a single twist, it appears to be hiding the state of the entire universe. The trailer isn't asking us to figure out who the villain is. We already know that. It's asking us to figure out what has already happened before the first act of the movie even begins. And if that's truly the direction Marvel is taking, then audiences may walk into theaters believing they're watching the beginning of the story when, in reality, they're arriving after Dr. Doom has already won the first battle. That possibility also explains why Marvel chose not to overwhelm the trailer with action. There are spectacular moments, of course, but notice how often the camera lingers on expressions instead of explosions. Thor doesn't simply attack, he reacts. Steve Rogers doesn't just appear, he makes us question his identity. Loki doesn't perform some massive display of cosmic power, he simply exists somewhere he shouldn't be. Even Dr. Doom's defining moment isn't built around destruction, it's built around restraint. The most powerful image in the trailer isn't a city being erased or a planet exploding. It's a villain stopping Stormbreaker with 2 fingers. That restraint is important because it communicates confidence. Someone trying to prove their strength uses overwhelming force. Someone who already knows they're untouchable barely has to move. That's exactly how Marvel wants us to perceive Doom. Not as someone desperately fighting to become the strongest being alive, but as someone who already believes the outcome has been decided. It also creates an interesting contrast with every major MCU villain we've seen before. Thanos announced his arrival through conquest. Kang introduced himself through knowledge of time. Ultron believed evolution justified extinction. But Dr. Doom appears to be motivated by something much more personal. Everything we've discussed points back to one recurring emotion: grief. Whether it's the family represented in the poster, the possibility of losing his own universe during an incursion, or his determination to gain powers beyond imagination, every thread leads back to a man who refuses to experience helplessness ever again. That's what separates Doom from villains who simply want power for its own sake. In his mind, power isn't the goal, it's the solution. If no one is stronger than him, then no one can ever take away what he loves again. It's a philosophy born from tragedy, but one that inevitably transforms into tyranny because protecting one world eventually becomes controlling every world. That emotional foundation could also become the key reason why the Avengers struggle against him. You can defeat an enemy who fights for domination because you understand what they're trying to achieve. But how do you defeat someone who genuinely believes they're saving existence? How do you convince a man to stop rewriting reality if every version of reality he's ever trusted has only ended in loss? That's where characters like Thor, Steve Rogers, and Loki become so important. They don't simply represent physical resistance, they represent different philosophies. Thor understands grief better than almost anyone in the MCU. Steve Rogers has always believed that hope is worth holding on to even when the odds are impossible. Loki sacrificed his own freedom so countless other lives could continue. Together they embody the exact values Dr. Doom abandoned. Their conflict with him isn't just about who wins the final battle. It's about whether hope or control becomes the future of the multiverse. And perhaps that's the most exciting realization hidden inside this trailer. For the first time since Avengers Endgame, the MCU feels like it's building toward an emotional event instead of simply a larger spectacle. Yes, the action will almost certainly be incredible. Yes, we'll see heroes from different realities crossing paths. Yes, the scale promises to be unlike anything Marvel has attempted before. But beneath all of that appears to be a surprisingly human story. A broken genius trying to erase the pain of losing his family. Heroes struggling to remember who they truly are. A god carrying the weight of infinite timelines. Old friends questioning whether they can still trust one another. Those are the kinds of conflicts that give massive blockbuster moments genuine emotional impact. Without that emotional core, even the biggest battles eventually become empty visual effects. Marvel seems determined not to repeat that mistake. Of course, until the full movie arrives, these remain theories built from the clues Marvel has intentionally chosen to reveal. The trailer gives us answers just often enough to keep us engaged, but it leaves far more questions waiting in the shadows. Did Dr. Doom truly absorb the powers of another cosmic being? Is the Steve Rogers we see really the man we've followed for over a decade, or someone whose history unfolded very differently? Is Loki revisiting old allies before becoming the god of stories, or is he desperately trying to repair a multiverse that's already been rewritten? And is the heartbreaking mural inside Doom's castle simply beautiful artwork, or the emotional key to understanding the MCU's next great villain? Each possibility opens another door, and that's exactly what great Marvel storytelling has always done best. It doesn't just make us anticipate the next movie, it invites us to investigate every frame until release day. If even half of these theories prove true, Avengers Doomsday won't just be another crossover event. It could become the film that completely redefines how we look back at the entire multiverse saga. Because sometimes the biggest twist isn't discovering who the villain is. Sometimes it's realizing that every story leading up to this moment has quietly been preparing us for someone who doesn't just want to defeat the Avengers, as so he wants to redefine reality itself. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into every hidden clue, theory, and MCU mystery, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to MovieCast. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, consider sending a $25 super thanks. It truly helps us keep creating cinematic breakdowns like this. Until next time, thanks for watching.